Spectrum Debate number 2. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or on our website, spectrumdebates.com. Tonight we'll be debating a variety of topics chosen by our guests, whom we shall meet in a moment. As ever, though, we want to hear your views, and we want you to send in questions and points to challenge each of our guests. You can do so by using the hashtag SD22. You can tell I'm new at this. I will do my best to put your questions to our guests and to let all our viewers know what you're thinking. If you're watching on Google Plus, you can also use the applause app, which tells us how much you agree or disagree with what's been said at any particular moment. And at 9 PM over on SpectrumDebates.com, a poll is launched asking who your favourite debater from tonight was. And last week's winner from the poll from the alternative election debate with 33% of the vote was Christopher Keane of the SNP. Not quite 45% though, was it? But there we go.
Well, no bad. No bad
now,
at all.
Without further ado, let me introduce you to each of our guests. So going from left to right on my screen, we have Daryl Devine. Hi, Daryl.
Daryl Devine, hello.
Oh, I do apologise. How are you?
Sorry?
I said, how are you?
I am fine. This is my first time doing anything like this, so it's quite exciting. A bit nervous.
You'll be fine. Right, next we have a former guest, Joe Pattinson. Hello.
Evening, how are you all?
I'm okay. Now, what will you be talking about tonight?
I'll be talking about Michael Gove, or Michael Bay, as we've been discussing, and how his reforms have been a success apart from the economy.
Fantastic. Next, we'll be hearing from Lily Jane Summers. Hello.
Hi, Leon.
How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic, Leon. How about yourself?
I'm great, thank you. What will your topic be?
My topic will be on the economy, and in particular the party's message on the economy.
Fantastic. And last but not least, we have Councillor Matthew Hulbert. How are you?
Woo.
Bless. Oh, thank you, Lily J. I'm good, Leon. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to be asking the following: how important is media training and communication to this election, and what improvements could each leader make in this area?
Fantastic. My name is Leon French. As you'll notice, I'll be your host for tonight. I'm afraid I'm not Gareth Anderson. For full disclosure, I am also a Conservative, but I'll do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge all of our guests and to explore all of the ideas. Our standard disclaimer here is that while our guests may support a party, none of them speaks for or on behalf of the party, so please take everything they say tonight as being their own personal opinions. Also, if you want to appear at the bottom of the screen next week, DM Spectrum Debates and reserve your place, or just tweet at us. We would like as many people as possible, whatever your political views. And the totally not biased at all randomizer tonight for our first topic has picked out Lily.
Thanks, Leon. First of all, that randomizer completely and utterly biased. So my topic tonight is going to be on the economy, and in particular the party's message on the economy. For me, one of the most frustrating parts of this general election is that for many of the parties, their rhetoric on the economy seems very, very disingenuous and even lying, quite frankly. I mean, you have the Tories with their long-term economic plan. You talk about the S&P saying they're against austerity, and then you look at the IFS saying, you know, the S&P can have very, very similar austerity plans to the Labour Party. You have the Tories saying the Labour Party is going to crash the economy, there's going to be bankruptcy. And so, you know, for me in this discussion, I would just want to ask all the participants, you know, are we doing a disservice to politics? But all the parties aren't actually being honest with the public of where the economy needs to go, how the economy needs to be, rather than seem to be utterly desperate, especially the Conservative Party, in order to scare voters. So that's what I would ask today, Leon.
What did you think about the IFS report that said that the people voting for the Labour Party would literally not know what they were voting for?
I would personally, Leon, I would say that for all the parties in particular. You know, the Conservative parties, they've got a £25 billion black hole. You know, they've made massive spending commitments. So you are partially right. The Labour Party do need to be a bit more honest where specifically the spending cuts need to lie. And you know, this is also part of my, you know, my question here, Leon. You know, the parties are are in many ways treating the voters like fools. You know, they're not being honest where the cuts are going to be, where our economy needs to go, and you know, the Labour Party aren't being completely honest. The SNP aren't being completely honest. The Conservative Party aren't being completely honest. And, you know, in many ways, they were just resulting to lies. You know, the Labour Party is going to bankrupt the economy. You know, interest rates are going to go sky high. You know, millions of jobs are going to be lost. You know, for me, we need to be honest about where our economy needs to go, you know, how our economy needs to change. And we need to stop treating people like fools and scaremongering, you know, with vacuous rhetoric, especially from people like Boris Johnson.
So, Matthew, thoughts on what Lily said?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think Lily Jane is entirely right in what she says. I mean, I think to be fair to the Lib Dems, we have been, you know, we've not tried to overpromise in this election. We've said that we'll cut less than the Tories and that we'll borrow less than Labour. And, you know, we are proposing, we're recognising that as a party that some cuts will have to be made. Whether I personally agree with that is a different matter, of course, but what we're saying as a party is that some cuts will have to be made, but that there will be spending in specific key areas, especially in education. So I think, to be fair to my party, and I think the IFS have said this, that actually, you know, we're proposing quite a sensible way forward. But I agree. You know, I think, I mean, for example, we made this promise on £8 billion for the NHS. Suddenly the Tories did it. But George Osborne was asked, I think, 8 times by Andrew Marr on the BBC to explain where that money would come from. And he just said, oh, the general economy. Well, you know, sorry, you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You know, where is that money going to come from? And I don't think the Tories have yet to really answer that.
Since the Lib Dems have sort of put themselves in the position where they are wanting to be another coalition partner after the election, can the people really trust the Lib Dem manifesto when we know that parts were taken out at the beginning of this coalition government?
Well, I think Leon, almost said Gareth then. I think, Leon, that I think you can say that of all of the manifestos, can't you? I mean, it looks like there's going to be a hung parliament, so it's unlikely that any of the manifestos that have been put forward are likely to be enacted in full. And so really, you know, and I guess this is the nature of the type of politics, the type of genuine multi-party politics that we have now, even under a first-past-the-post system, that actually what the manifestos are not programmes for government, they are programmes to potentially be negotiated over. That is the honest truth of it.
Right. Darryl, as an independent sort of minded person, how do you view how the parties are speaking about the economy?
Well, in terms of honesty, I do think that the SNP have the one up on that compared to everybody else. In terms of their economic plans, I think they speak the most sense at the very least with their promises saying that we are going to cut austerity and they're going to increase spending in social services, because, you know, at what point does austerity actually stop? And suddenly, you know, we stop all the cuts and all the savings, and how does that improve things for the majority of people? And when it comes to the Lib Dems, they're not really the ones to have they have went back on a lot of things that they've said, so how can we trust what they say in terms of their economy? So basically what I'm trying to say is that I think the SNP, we do need to, especially the people in Scotland, have to go on what they say and believe that they'll try and increase spending.
Considering the IFS have essentially accused the SNP of being a little bit dishonest with the public about being the sort of anti-austerity party, do we think that the SNP are being honest?
Well, in my opinion, they've done more. They have had more honest actions than dishonest. They've made a lot of promises and they have stuck to them. They promised to lower and abolish a lot of tuition fees, and they've done that, for example, some that the Lib Dems never managed to do. So I think that when it comes to a lot of issues, they will be more honest about them. And I think that their actual plans make a lot more sense than some like the Conservatives that are just determined to keep on going with austerity and just cutting and cutting.
Right. we'll have a look at some tweets now. Hang on a sec. I'm sorry about this. I'm new to this. So we'll have a look at some what people are saying on Twitter. Chris G at Chris G 0000 says IFS says Lib Dem figures on tax avoidance are the least accurate of all. He also said pointless Lib Dems pledging more, given that they'll adopt Tory/Labour numbers eventually. Considering that's a point against Lib Dems, Matthew, would you like to respond to that?
Sorry, I missed some of that, I'm afraid.
He said IFS says Lib Dem figures on tax avoidance are the least accurate of all, and he also said pointless Lib Dems pledging more, given they'll adopt Tory/Labour numbers eventually.
Well, on the tax avoidance, I just don't know. I'm afraid I don't pretend to know the details of that. On the other point, I'd just go back to it's so annoying that only Lib Dems get this point put to us in terms of you weren't able to deliver everything in your manifesto. We delivered 75% of what was on in our manifesto, which I think you'll find is more than the Tories managed to deliver, despite they were the much bigger party in this coalition. So, as I said a few minutes ago, all of the manifestos in this election, considering that it's very unlikely that anyone will have a majority, none of them are really full programmes for government. They are all programmes to be negotiated about after May the 7th.
Right. We'll have a look at a couple more tweets and then we'll go to Joe. A Confused Ninja at Confused Ninja. We rage against failed promises, but you can't plan that precisely over 5 years. Does that encourage politicians to be vague? Interesting question. Cameron S at Cameron_surname. Is everyone with a Scottish accent a danger to the British economy? Confused face. I would never comment. Well, considering you just spoke, Joe, I think we'll now go to you. I made some direct accusations against the Conservative Party over sort of looking desperate and also misleading the public. Do you think that's true?
I don't think it is at all. I think the message is very clear that it's strong, it's sturdy, it's robust for the public. It's one of the most positive, despite the negativity which I despise from outside sort of thing, i.e. the character of Ed Miliband and so on. But that's nothing to do with the economy on the question here. But I think the message on the economy and employment, we have a record. We have a strong message. It's quite clear.
Do you want to respond to that, Lily?
I find that absolutely laughable for you to say the Tories are positive. How on earth are they positive by resorting to scaremongering and lies? They're saying the Labour Party are going to bankrupt the country, there's going to be chaos, the Tories are apparently competent. I mean, how on earth is that positive at all?
Well, you look at the scale of the negativity, I agree. It's not what I want from a campaign, but I want more positivity in the message. I want more positivity surrounding. I don't want the personal attacks. It's not what politics is about. You want to strive for the message. It's about message versus message. It's not about rhetoric. It's about message. That's at the end of the day. That's my personal opinion.
Vacuous message. Long-term economic plan which doesn't exist.
Well, a better plan, a better future.
Competence. That's vacuous as well.
Well, considering, Lily, that the Conservatives are still considered by the public to be most trusted on the economy, does that not mean that it's not really a vacuous message and it's one that's getting through to the public?
Well, when you say a lie over and over again, Leon, then sometimes it can actually go through. And make lies that there's Labour left a mess, which wasn't true. When you repeat it over and over and over and over and over again, Leon, it does make it slightly difficult.
And Leon, you ask some of the people in some of the poorest wards whether they feel that the long-term economic plan is working for them. I think
it doesn't exist.
I think you'll find that it's working for those at the very top, and it's working for the nice rich chums of Cameron and Osborne. It's not working for the vast majority of people who are still finding things really tough at the moment, and that is one of the reasons why I hope there's a progressive coalition after May the 7th to really make sure that the very poorest in our nation are helped and given support.
Precisely.
Right. Well, I think now we will move on. If you would like to, Lily, close the topic, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Well, I just hope, Leon, that after the general election that all the political parties can stop treating the voters like fools. I mean, I'm making the point particularly against the Conservative Party because I think they're the party that's making the most lies and scaremongering. But obviously the Labour Party, obviously, they can do the same, you know. For example, NHS privatisation. There are more market forces in the NHS, but doesn't necessarily mean privatisation. So all the parties can do this. But I'm making the point particularly against the Conservative Party. But I really do hope that after the next general election, we can start looking at reforming our economy, making sure it works for the poorest in society, the most vulnerable are protected, and we don't have to resort to scaremongering and lies that have been promulgated by, quite frankly, the right-wing media. I mean, the Daily Mail, for instance, on the front page today, they said a Labour SNP government would be the biggest crisis in abdication. I mean, it's such hyperbole. It's absolutely
Hasn't the World War happened since then? Exactly. Hasn't, you know, the Cold War and World War II happened since then? If it's as bad as that, then it'll be quite an event.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's complete, you know, scaremongering. You know, we need a positive message in our country. We shouldn't resort to scaremongering and lies from, you know, many parts of, you know, our political system today, Leon.
Right. Yeah, right. Next, we will be moving on to Matthew, who's talking about the media and politicians.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leon. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask, you know, how important is media training and communication at this election, and what improvements could each leader make in this area? I ask as someone trained in broadcast journalism and someone who works in the media, in radio specifically, for a few years. And so, you know, I've really been, as well as looking at this election, of course, from a biased position as a member of a party, I've also tried to look at it dispassionately in terms of how each leader communicates. I think probably the best example of this, and where either improvements could be made or where someone has been overtrained, is, I have to say, Ed Miliband. Now, I don't want to pick on Ed Miliband. I'm trying to do this dispassionately, but I really think he's either not received enough training, or he's received too much, and he's totally self-conscious of the way he comes across. But, you know, I have to say I find it difficult to watch him now. I'm constantly looking for those verbal tics. You know, well, let me just answer that instead of just actually answering it. And that kind of thing. I'm constantly watching out for those now and not listening to the actual content of what he says. I don't doubt at all that he's very genuine in what he says and that he cares about people and would do some good things as Prime Minister. But I don't think those messages are getting across because, I mean, I tweeted some Labour folk the other day who've met him and said, you know, is that how he speaks when he's just not being broadcast? And, you know, I don't know why it seems very overemphasised. So, I mean, I think the other leaders have got things they could learn as well. But, I mean, I guess I'm mainly talking about Ed Miliband because I notice it so much with him that it seems overly forced and not coming across as especially genuine, even when he is being genuine. And so, you know, I think the issue of how our leaders communicate, especially in this TV age, is really, really important, whether we like that or not. And so I'm interested in, you know, how our leaders come across and what more they could do, or indeed what less they could do, I suppose, to come across better to the public so that more members of the public understand the messages that they're putting forward.
Right, yeah. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, to be honest. You say that one thing that he says is, if I could just answer that. Is it not the case with all leaders, including Nick Clegg, though? I mean, one of the most annoying phrases I find in politics is, what I would say is.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right, Leon. You know, I don't know why politicians, I guess they all seem to want to some greater or lesser degree, mimic Tony Blair. Well, yes, Tony Blair came across very well in many respects, but he was being himself. To try and spend your whole time aping him just comes across, and you're right to an extent. Clegg does it to an extent. Cameron does it to an extent. It's just really odd. But I find all of the you knows and well looks and just all of that so annoying. Just speak in a normal way. Just tell us what you think in your normal voice. If you say clearly enough, people will understand.
If only everyone was as sensitive. What are your thoughts on how the leaders go on, Daryl?
Well, definitely in this climate and in this sort of time, politicians' appearances are more important than ever. And it definitely, you were bringing up Ed Miliband. Concerning him, it definitely is very apparent that he's almost like a person who's been made by committee. He's very obviously got like 3 or 4 aides behind the scenes telling him, no, Ed, people like it when you do this, people like it when you do that, and he's trying to force all of these things in to make himself more likeable. And as they say, when you try and please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. In my opinion, the leaders who come across the best are people like someone like Nicola Sturgeon, or even Leanne Wood, or people who do sound a lot. Even Natalie Bennett, I think, comes across a lot more sincere than somebody like Ed Miliband or Nick Clegg, or especially David Cameron, who a lot of people are just picking up on the fact that he's just trying to come across as a bit more than a normal person, a bit more on the level of a common, working class or middle class individual, rather than the personality that he really is. And I think the thing with Tony Blair was he was a mere natural kind of theatrical kind of personality, and you see a lot of that in someone like Nigel Farage. Like, I don't agree with a lot of UKIP, but I do acknowledge the fact that a large part of their appeal to a lot of people is Nigel Farage and his charisma when he comes with it, because a lot of what he does say, I mean, he's someone you can listen to. Well, for someone with my point of view, you listen to him and you just shake your head, but he does come across a lot better and a lot more alive and sincere than the others. So it can be used, if you're a good speaker, it can be used for a great deal of your party. It can be used for a great deal of your appeal.
On Twitter just now, a confused ninja has said, I think politicians are now coached by their central officers, rehearse party lines rather than being open and honest. What do the general panel think about that?
No.
Well, as I say, they're kind of sort of people made by committee, and they're that's the reason that they use all the words like "if I was" and "if I could say" or not. They're just trying to pad out their language and sound both intelligent and likable at the same time, and it's a very strange combination. They're trying to brand themselves and make themselves into a brand, and when they don't manage that very well, it's for a very strange viewing of them.
What do you think about it, Joe?
Well, I think it's very clear that people are obviously rehearsed from the central office. I think it's no secret these days. But figures like Blair, maybe Clinton as well, Thatcher, charisma comes across naturally. Yeah. Okay, charisma comes naturally, and Ed Miliband, David Cameron, and Nick Clegg maybe don't have the same level of charisma as a leader should have. But I think it's very clear that Ed Miliband stands out as the PR nitty gritty and nitpicking, even should I say.
He's definitely. Oh, sorry.
You can say. You can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say he's definitely a man who should operate more behind the scenes if he's going to have his role in the party, as opposed to the front man for it. I mean, that's the thing that everyone used to make fun of him for. You can't tell the difference between him and his brother, and he looks a bit like Wallace and Gromit and all that, and just his general mannerisms, he doesn't quite seem like the person you should put as the front man for the party.
No, I would agree with that, because if you think about the global interactions with other leaders, would you want Ed Miliband to be the leader of the UK going there? Maybe on merit, maybe, but what effect does the personality have on that? Sort of having trust issues, maybe. But there's things like that. Are quite important on the first glance, as well. The leaders, but also the public as well. You can't forget the public. They're the ones who are voting.
Right. we've just had a few more messages on Twitter, so I'll read these out, and then we'll go to Lily to ask what she thinks about what's been said about Ed Miliband. So, Robert Winfield at Robert Winfield 2, he sent 2 in. I really do hope that no politicians mimic Tony Blair. Rather definite. And he's also said, I have frequently made the point that politics is far too centrally controlled. I wonder how many people on Twitter who are members of parties agree with that one. Cameron S. at Cameron_surname again, he said, Natalie Bennett, sincere, she must need help then. Which I think is just kind. So, Lily, what do you think about what's been said about Ed Miliband by the panel?
Well, firstly, I agree with mostly everyone here tonight regarding Matthew's discussion. I think on the whole, it's the problem in all areas of politics. I think it seems that politics is only really resigned on style. You know, it doesn't matter what your opinions are. It doesn't matter on your substance. You could be the most vacuous politician like Boris Johnson. You know, as long as you've got that charisma. And I think it's really, really sad, you know, state of affair how politics is, you know, going this way. You know, for me personally, you know, I want to go into politics where people actually care what my opinions are. They care about my argument. They care about, you know, where I want this country to go. So, you know, I would make the point that we really do need to change politics. So it's, you know, it's more focused on substance, you know, on ideas, rather than whether Ed Miliband is good at eating a bacon sarnie. You know, Ed Miliband, I think, is very, very similar to most politicians today. Is that he's been, you know, molded by central office. You know, the most sad part is that when he was running for the Labour leader, he seemed really, really radical. You know, he wanted to focus on ideas and substance, and he's still got that a little bit, you know, with him. But he's still so focused on, you know, style, and it's so frustrating. You know, I would make the point though that he's not the worst at it. I think David Cameron is much, much worse. But Ed Miliband, you know, he's exactly the same. So I would make the final point that we really do need to change politics. So we don't care about style anymore. We actually focus on ideas, and actually we focus on substance and where we want this country to go.
We should.
Yeah, right. I've got one comment that's put in by Chris G at Chris G0000. Quite an interesting thought, and I'll throw this statement out to the whole panel before I bring it back to Matthew to close. He says, Attlee didn't have charisma. Oswald did. Spare us from politicians with charisma. Now, I suppose that's really quite a good point, because some of the best politicians really have been some of the ones without the charisma. I mean, I hate to invoke Godwin's law.
Like Attlee.
Hitler had fantastic charisma, whether we like it or not, a fantastic speaker. Does a politician really need to have charisma to be successful in what they do? Anyone?
I do think charisma is important, but I think substance and ideas is a hell of a lot more important. You know, from my personal point of view, Clement Attlee was the best Prime Minister ever, and he had no charisma whatsoever. Winston Churchill mocked him. I can't remember the stories used to say, but yeah, substance and ideas is so much more important. Charisma is also important, but it's not the most important.
But Lily Jane, the pre-TV era, wasn't it? You know, I think we do have to. I mean, I agree with you that substance should be more important, but the fact is, we live in the age we live in. We live in an age with 24-hour TV news, 24-hour.
I don't think that's relevant at all, though, because I think it's the media, it's promulgated to make it important. I don't think voters on the street actually care about substance or whether you're good on TV. So I think it's actually the media. It's the problem.
I think they do, because
they do.
The reason they didn't care as much back before the era of television is just because it wasn't possible to actually see them like that. As soon as we have the chance to see them like that, it becomes, because, you know, we're like, as a people, we are pretty irrational, and we do see, oh, they look better, they talk better, they obviously must think better. Our brains sort of tell us that. So when we see someone there shouting and arguing and getting and being bold, we think they are a good leader, and to an extent they are, because you can imagine somebody walking into a conference room and speaking on your side and being defiant about it. When you see someone like Ed Miliband, who looks like he's struggling to talk half the time, you think, will he be able to really? He might be, but that's how I think he'll be better as a behind-the-scenes man in an area he's obviously more comfortable in, to make things happen and to work. But to a lot of people, politicians have to market themselves to you, and so it is important to be able to do that well, I think.
If I was to use a more relevant and current example, could it not be that we compare the difference between Nigel Farage and Ed Miliband? Why is it that despite most people would possibly say that Ed Miliband is sometimes a bit more reasonable, why is it that so many people often seem drawn to Nigel Farage?
Oh, because he. I mean, I'm like Daryl. I disagree with virtually every word that comes out of Nigel Farage's mouth. But the fact is, he talks in a very, very direct way. I might even say, don't want to be too controversial, but he talks in a very kind of simple way. He uses very simple language. You know, you certainly can't confuse anything that he says. And I think people appreciate that. And he also doesn't appear to have some of these verbal tics that have come into the vernacular of almost all of our other leaders. And so I think people appreciate that. And I'm going to have to say, I think Lily Jane is just really being just a little bit naive. You know, I'm afraid whether she likes it or not, we are in the TV age. That's not going away. We're in the internet age and the Twitter age, where every single utterance of every single media appearance is analysed.
Is voters' decision going to be decided on that little media appearance?
But
is people going to vote Tory because Ed Miliband can't eat a bacon sarnie? I doubt it.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying that, Lily Jane. But I think it feeds into an overall impression, and once an overall impression starts to gain momentum. And yes, that's fed by the written press as well, of course, who latch on to any kind of difference or any kind of perceived weakness. Then I think that can, over time, have gather its own momentum and lead to people ultimately deciding to vote for or not for someone. So yes, I think over a period of time, if it's a sustained campaign and a sustained way that someone's viewed, it absolutely can lead to a change at the ballot box.
Right. Before I go to Joe for a couple of thoughts, I'm just going to say Chris G's just put that one of the jokes on Twitter, Lily, from Churchill. Attlee, I'll start that again. Attlee, a most modest man with much to be modest about.
Well, he defeated Churchill.
He's just charming.
Thanks to Chris G for that.
Yeah. Right. Joe, final thoughts before we bring this discussion to a close.
Well, I want to come back to the common and dull politicians. I think politicians should be dull because I quite like less government, and the duller the better. That's basically my point.
Right, fair enough. So we'll now bring it to you, Matthew, to close.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, as I've just said, I think political communication, and especially the way people communicate via television, is incredibly important. I mean, I think back to one of my favourite historical politicians is John F. Kennedy. Been reading a little bit about him more today, and I think it's really interesting that in the debates that he had with Richard Nixon, those listening on radio thought that Nixon won. He had far better detail, that he came across far better. Those watching on TV, which were of course many tens of millions more, thought that Kennedy won. Now that wasn't, I don't suspect, just because of the content. That was, and I'm afraid, Lily Jane, this is the truth, because he looked better, because they considered him more handsome, because Richard Nixon looked shifty. Whether we like it or not, these things do matter, and pretending that they don't is no way to help those people who need help in this area. And I think Ed Miliband would do himself a lot more favours and would come across better and get people to actually listen to the content of what he wants to say, which I agree is the most important thing for any elite leader, if he was less self-conscious and actually just came in and just chatted perfectly normally and just spoke in a normal way.
Right then, thank you very much. Just to remind everyone again, around 9 PM or so, we'll be opening the post-show poll so that you can vote for who you think has been your favourite debater of the evening. So now I will bring it to Joe to open his topic.
My topic is why Michael Gove is the biggest success outside the economy for the Conservatives, because I think he's the sort of person that the Labour would want to try and improve in life, to say. And also, what I think about Michael Gove is the success of his reforms have brought around good change, they brought about flexibility, they brought about choice, which is very important for the families and the parents, for the children to succeed, but also the academic framework that's been put in place now has improved. I know teachers, myself, have said that it has improved the way in which they want to teach their children, but also in the way they have freedom to help the way the children's needs are now more easily attained to. But the thing is, I like it. The thing is choice, is the flexibility of everybody involved now, but also the academic part of it is much more improved, especially with the structure.
Right. Lily, what are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I find it slightly bizarre that you regard the coalition's economic reforms to be actually good. Second of all, you mentioned Michael Gove's reforms. You mean the reforms that see teachers' confidence at the lowest levels? You know, many teachers actually want to get out of the profession because they're not appreciated enough. You have, money being diverted from, primary school places to free schools. You have free schools standards decreasing. I mean, I personally would want to ask you, I mean, what part of Michael Gove's reform do you think to be a good thing? Because I personally don't see it.
I believe the flexibility and choice is a freedom that we must enjoy, and as part
that flexibility and choice that's seen resources being diverted from primary schools to free schools, and many free schools have actually been closed down, or you've seen the results not actually as good as the government has actually assumed or wanted, as you could say.
I didn't get that actually. Sorry, could you repeat that again, please?
What I'm saying is that, first of all, resources are being diverted from primary school places to free schools, and even free schools aren't really a success in the first place. So my question to you is, in regards to choice, I mean, choice for who? I mean, primary school places are decreasing, free schools aren't working, teachers aren't being appreciated, and many teachers actually want to leave the industry. I mean, that doesn't seem like reforms are actually a good thing. And even his successor, Nicky Morgan, I believe, she's even backing away from Michael Gove's reforms. If Michael Gove's reforms were such a great success, why was he sacked as education secretary?
Quite right.
I don't think he was sacked. Let's be honest. Yeah, I believe he was promoted. Let's be honest.
Oh, Joe, give it up. He was sacked.
He wasn't. He was promoted.
He was promoted.
He was promoted from education secretary to chief whip.
Promoted to chief whip. Are you kidding me?
Not really, because there's the whipper.
Joe, we don't help ourselves if we say things which are palpably not correct. I mean.
Well, the Tories are good at that, aren't they? With long-term economic plan, Labour left a mess, so they're really good at that.
Come on, let's be polite and let's speak one at a time.
I'm being polite. I'm just saying that it's not helpful when we say things just for party reasons that are palpably not correct. Going from education secretary to chief whip is not a promotion.
Yeah.
Kind of is.
Well,
look at it, of course. But I think freedom to choose where your child goes and flexibility, it creates competition. It is quite clear, and that is a very clear message that's been sent out.
Right, while things cool down a little bit, I'm going to go.
Cool, Leon. Everything's cool.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Twitter and see what people are saying. A Confused Ninja has said, the Tories brought Gove into government. Think I'd settle for an armament. I'm afraid I don't know what one of those is. Chris G. Labour legislated to prevent tuition fees, then voted to impose them. Lib Dem vow on tuition fees didn't amount to a hill of beans. dear me. And Chris G, again, if free schools are so bad, why don't Labour pledge to scrap them? Lily?
Oh, you asking me that question? I wouldn't necessarily free schools are bad. I just think that it's wrong to divert resources from primary school places, which are really, really important at the moment, to free schools. I personally wouldn't want to abolish free schools. I think many free schools are, fantastic. I just think the choices made by this government, have been wrong, and I think it's very it's an ideological battle by Michael Gove, and I would repeat the question again to Joe: is if Michael Gove's reforms were so great, why was he sacked?
He wasn't sacked.
Okay.
You
keep believing that, Joe. You keep believing.
He transferred position.
That's a separate argument you can have later if you want. We'll have a whole show dedicated to whether or not Michael Gove was sacked. But first, I'm going to come to Matthew.
Thanks very much, Leon. And just on that, he was quite clearly sacked. That is not a promotion. I have some experience and knowledge on this area because I'm on the Lib Dems Parliamentary Committee for Education, Families and Young People, and we have heard a great deal of evidence suggesting that research shows that free schools are totally failing in terms of equalities, that there is a tick box attitude to equalities, both BAME and LGBT+, and so they are definitely failing on that. Due to Michael Gove's changes in education, we also saw the loss of the middle tier with the loss of local education authorities in many areas, and so we now have this situation, and I've had it in my own ward, that a family came to me. Their child was being allegedly bullied at not a free school but an academy. They went to the pastoral officer who was trying to deal with the situation. The head teacher came in and totally went against the school's own policies. We then had a situation where the family went to the governing body. The governing body closed ranks around the head teacher and said to the family, if you want to complain further, you have to go to the Secretary of State. We've now literally got a situation where, because that middle tier, no one's suggesting that local education authorities were perfect, but they were a democratic middle tier that could deal with these with such issues as the one I've just outlined. We've now got a situation where, theoretically at least, because there's no middle tier, the Secretary of State is having to deal with every little issue that is happening in schools. And that is another result of Michael Gove's failed, absolutely disastrous education policies, which was why he was sacked from his position, and Nicky Morgan was brought in because it was felt that she'd be more of a compromising figure and better able to attract the teacher vote for the Conservatives.
Since the Lib Dems have a schools minister, if I remember rightly, David Laws, they'll correct me if I'm wrong, if they're so bad, or not bad as such, but if there are these failings, why haven't the Liberal Democrats done more to oppose in government?
Well, I'm no massive fan of David Laws either, Leon. So, he's rather from the different wing of the party to what I am, and I think he probably agrees with a fair amount of Michael Gove's changes. So, I'm not going to sit here and necessarily defend him. But I just feel that one good thing, I have to say though, and I know David Laws agrees with this and that it's in our manifesto, is that we would, you see, Joe talks about choice. Sorry, this is the other point I wanted to make. Joe talks about choice. But Nicky Morgan said on Today a while back on Radio 4 that it was put to her that if a local education authority in a certain area wanted to open a school, would she allow that? And she said no, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. If it's not, it must be a free school now or an academy, that the local education authority isn't allowed to open a school. And the Lib Dems have said that we want to see a situation where if there's enough support and if the proper structures are in place, that a local education authority can open a school. So in actual fact, Joe's Tory changes, his party's changes in this area, have reduced choice. They've not opened up choice.
Right. So before I come to Daryl to get his thoughts on it, because of course Scotland, their education system is managed in Scotland. I'm going to go to Twitter to see what people have been saying. If no one minds, I'd like to give a prize to Chris G for most contributions on Twitter. Got a set of tweets from him. I've already said that. It's weird that Labour's definition of what constitutes success is whether it benefits the workforce. In this case, teachers. SD Big Brother. Things have descended into Lib Lab attacks on Con. Host Regent has issued yellow cards. Consider yourself warned. And I think Lily and Matthew, you'll appreciate this one from Michael Craig at Michael Craig 96. As a Tory, Gove was most certainly sacked.
Quite right.
I think you two might appreciate that one. So, Daryl, coming from Scotland, where the education system is managed by your government, how does this debate look?
Well, I have heard a lot about Michael Gove, even though he doesn't directly oversee our education, and I don't hear that much good about him. But if the education system's anything like it is in Scotland, then it does have a lot that's needing to be fixed. In Scotland, our education system, for the most part, as in terms of primary and secondary schools, I think is managed quite well. But there have been a lot of changes in terms of further education. We do have free tuition fees for universities, but there is a situation currently with community colleges and subject schools, as you might call them. Currently, I'm a college student, and I go to a college, not a university, but a community college. And due to austerity cuts and due to the overarching funding by England and the larger UK, there's actually been a lot of closures of Scottish colleges, and there's had to be a lot of rebranding and a lot of umbrella branding. So certain colleges only do certain things now. They can only be allocated so much budget and so many skills and facilities now. So there's been a really negative impact on that. And well, that's just what I have to say about it.
Is that not due to the SNP?
Well, it's due to how they're managing their budget. I don't think the SNP is perfect, but they can only receive so much money from the UK at large, and so that's how I think if we managed more of our own affairs and if we were given a chance to have other sources of funding, such as the North Sea oil, for example, then we could have solved those issues.
Due to Devo Max, there'll be £7.6 billion in cuts, even with North Sea oil included. So that proposal would actually introduce more cuts to Scotland, not less.
Who was it that said that?
The Institute for Physical Studies.
Well, that's just the statements of one study. I don't know what it would result in, and I'm not saying that the SNP would fix those things, but that's just the situation right now and the situation that I'm currently dealing with in education.
But isn't the situation, Daryl, sometimes with the SNP, and I know you claim to be independent, although you seem to be supporting a lot of SNP policy tonight, isn't the real situation, though, and it really annoys me, is that when it's something seen as good that the SNP devolved government have done, then they take all the credit for it. When it's something seen as bad, then it's Westminster's fault. I mean, really, that is the worst kind of childish politics. If it's the SNP that have introduced cuts to community colleges, they should take the blame for that, and they should be grown up and adult enough and defend their own position and not just blame the Westminster system.
Well, maybe they should, but it's been more of a sort of allocation of budget. They've taken the money that they perhaps could have used to improve colleges, and they've put it towards tuition fees. So it is an allocation of a limited budget. Now, I'm not entirely up on it, but from what I understand, that is the situation with it. So they're taking one thing and trying to improve another, but they can only do so much, and that is something that they would need to work on in order to get my vote, because I'm still not entirely secure in voting for the SNP. I could vote either for the SNP or the Greens is another option I'm looking into, but currently the SNP do generally have a lot of policies that make sense to me, but that is one thing that they do need to sort out, and it's something that has to be sorted out between them and Westminster. So I think they're both to blame to an extent.
Right. Do we have any final comments from anyone before I bring it to Joe to finish?
Leon, am I able to come back on tuition fees?
Very briefly, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I just wanted to say, I mean, me and Lily Jane have been agreeing a lot tonight, but one thing I would say is that, you know, what happened in terms of the tripling of tuition fees, which I didn't agree with, and was I a Lib Dem MP at the time, I would have voted against. But we did that under the duress of coalition. Let us never forget, and let students never forget, that Labour, with massive majorities on both occasions, in 1997
I thought you just blaming somebody else for your fault was childish.
And in 2000 and in 2001 said that they wouldn't introduce fees and wouldn't introduce top-up fees in their manifestos, and did both. And that was not under the duress of coalition, that was with massive majorities. So I'll take no lectures from Labour on tuition fees.
It's not relevant to the topic. But,
Well, I'm not Labour, and I'm lecturing you about it, and I'm lecturing the fact that you just said that throwing your faults at somebody else. I thought you said that was childish, yet you just done that exact thing.
But Darryl, I totally accept the fact that the Lib Dems made a pledge and then went into government and broke it, and we, believe me, we paid a cost at the ballot box, and you know, I'm afraid we'll see more of that on May the 7th, probably in parts of the country. So you know, we absolutely have to take ownership of the fact that we weren't able to fulfil that pledge, and we have paid a significant political cost for that.
Yeah, you have to make another vlog saying you're sorry.
Right.
There'll be no song of me saying I'm sorry.
Right. What we're going to do now, because we're veering slightly off topic, we're going to have a look at some tweets, and then I'm going to come to Joe to finish the topic. So we have James at Statism Room 101. Gove being sacked was a horrendous error on Cameron's part, in my opinion. A confused ninja at a confused ninja. This is to Chris G. What would the cost of abolishing free schools compared to keeping the ones that were there, not creating more? Michael Craig, again, at Michael Craig 96. The SNP has shockingly cut 140,000 college places. Can't say that everything good is the SNP and everything bad is Westminster.
Exactly.
Cameron S. Cameron _surname. If Scotland managed his own economic affairs, it could cause £7.6 million of cuts. So long live the union, Scottish students. Billion. Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I think we will go now to Joe to finish the topic. Joe?
Okay. Yeah. One thing I would like to say about why, and to conclude, is that the moulding of the child's education has become much more finite and more free for the teacher to do. And it's most important that the child is put first, not the teacher. Let's be honest, it's about educating the child. And when you have that, the child improves, and also if you have the academic framework improved, the question, it is proved that. But if you let me finish, if you have an academic framework that is severely improved, then a lot will be more achieved.
Is it? No replies. Come on, we're finishing the topic.
Let me finish. And if you have that, then you have a positive framework to improve upon. But also you have the LGBT thing, which I disapprove of. It must be there. I'm of more of a liberal conservative stance on social reform, so I want that to be much more firmly in. Just get it in there. It's one of our legacies. I'm a Cameroon, and this is this is what I want to put in. Yeah, but still, it is clear that it's positive stances are made, positive steps are made.
Right then, very nice. Now, if nobody minds, because Darryl tonight has been our roving independent commentator, if nobody minds, I'm going to jazz things up a bit, and I'm going to suggest a topic for the panel to discuss. I will be completely independent, of course. Now, I always am, don't you, Scott? Everyone saw my attempt at being partisan last week. It didn't go well. This is me redeeming myself. This is being dubbed as one of the most unpredictable elections in living memory, I should imagine. And one of the things that is going to feature very much in the results of this election is the influence of the nations within the UK, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and how much of an influence they will have on the future, the next Westminster Parliament, but also the next government. So what I'd like to ask the panel to discuss, and I'll just set the randomizer off to find the first person to speak.
Let me guess, I go first.
Is, do we think that there is going to be a massive influence from the nations, or has this influence been overstated? And the randomizer, you'll be happy to know, Lily, has come out with Daryl. So, Daryl, what do you think?
Well, I definitely think that in terms of this election, we have unlocked a much more wider voting pool. Just compare that. In 2010, it was such a radical thing that you had 3 main parties as opposed to the 2-party system, and now you've got so many different parties. You have got the SNP gaining power, you've got the Greens, you've got the Welsh party that I can't really pronounce. Is it Plaid Cymru?
Yeah.
Plaid Cymru.
Cookie Welsh. And you also have the Northern Irish parties, and you have all these different kind of parties now that would have been unimaginable that they would gain as much power and exposure a few years ago. So I think that this is definitely going to be the election of the minority parties, and I don't think anyone's going to come out with a large majority this year. And I do think that there is definitely a lot more voting and a lot more political discussion going on in the other nations of the UK now.
Right. What do you think about the potential influence of the SNP on the next government? Who do you think they may go into coalition with or do a deal with, if anyone at all?
Tories.
I think they'll go in with Labour. Like, Scottish Labour aren't doing very well at the moment in Scotland, but I do think that they are the most likely candidate for Scotland. The SNP. Well, should they represent Scotland to go into a coalition with? I think SNP and Labour it can be a very likely outcome. And the paper's saying that it's going to be the worst thing since, the Second World War or whatever catastrophic examples they like to say. It won't be nearly that bad for anybody. I think certainly won't be any worse than the Conservative Lib Dem coalition. I think. I think it'll be a bit of fresh air, and I don't think the SNP are going to go into Westminster with the intention of trying to destroy anything. I think they'll try and represent Scotland well enough, and they'll try and move things a bit left, try and stop austerity quite a bit, and just do what we've voted them in for, hopefully.
Right. Joe. Oh, sorry. Lily. I looked at the wrong screen. What do you think?
I personally don't think, firstly, that the Northern Ireland parties will make much of a big influence. The DUP obviously with the Tories, but I personally don't think the Tories will gain enough seats to realistically have a chance of being in the next government. In regards to the SNP, I would say first of all, I think it's absolutely disgraceful from David Cameron trying to be an English nationalist and scaremongering about the potential of the SNP being in government. I mean, you can't complain before the referendum that, Scotland, please be with us. We need you, Scotland. And then afterwards, don't be involved in the government, Scotland. How dare you? So United
because
Kingdom.
They feel threatened.
Yeah, precisely. They do feel very, very threatened. I think an SNP Labour, deal or government would be rather interesting. I think it would be something different. I think most likely, Leon, that there won't be a deal. I think what could actually happen is that after the next election, the Tories have no chance of being in the next government. You'll have the Labour minority government, and then Labour will propose a Queen's speech, and then the Labour Party or Ed Miliband will say to the SNP, okay, vote it down. Dare it. Come on then, vote it down. And it will just depend if the SNP will have the balls to do so. So I would hope they would have a deal. I really wish Trident would be scrapped. I would absolutely love that. I would love to have more progressive policies. I would love to actually reform the electoral system so we have PR, so we can have this situation again where, smaller parties are given an extra say, where they can, where like Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland are given a greater say, because the southeast of England have way too much power and influence over the United Kingdom as it is. We really do need to redistribute power. So yeah, I would find it very, very interesting to have an SNP Labour government. I think it would be quite potentially really good, especially if we scrap Trident. And secondly, Leon, finally, I really wish that we could reform the electoral system and have proportional representation, so we can have greater influence and power for smaller parties like the Greens, for instance.
Out of interest, and this is just a question that I've seen posed before, since you're asking more for essentially more conciliation between parties and more representative politics, we have more parties working together, would that not mean that we'd end up having to rely less on party manifestos? So when we vote for a party because of certain points in the manifesto, the problem in the back of our mind is, whereas we've always been able to think, right, if this party gets the majority, they're going to be able to do this, in coalition, they're going to have to compromise and they're going to have to throw some policies out. Would that not then become a problem, really? I'll come back to it in a minute, Matthew.
I think you're going to have to do something. I think the Lib Dems for this election were saying about having red lines. So I think you would have to have a situation regarding red line, Leon, where the party would say, we're going to have this, otherwise we're not going to be in government. This is what we really, really want, but we're not going to promise. And this is what we're going to try. Yeah. I think probably that's the best way to go about it, personally. So yeah, manifestos would have to be changed. Sorry, Darryl.
Well, I think as well it will work a lot better if you have two parties that really do agree a lot more, as opposed to the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, two parties that seem like the opposite ends of the magnets coming together. If you have parties that are more in the same political spectrum as each other, then they might be able to work better and have more of their policies done.
Yeah, so right. I will come to Matthew now with thoughts on both what I've said about the nations, but also about future coalitions as well. So if you want to start with nations and the influence that they will have on the next parliament and the next government.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're talking predominantly about Scotland, aren't we, and the popularity of the SNP. I mean, I don't agree with Scottish independence, but you have to hand it to the SNP. They've played a blinder really since the referendum loss their side. Of course, let's not forget. You'd almost think that they'd won it. How popular they've become. And talking about political.
Hang on, Darryl. Let him finish.
Thank you. And talking about the communications as we were earlier on, I think Nicola Sturgeon comes across very well, and I think that's part of the reason why the party has seen such a meteoric rise. In terms of coalitions and manifestos, I mean, as I was saying earlier on, I think and I think increasingly we'll see hung parliament, even under first past the post, I think the British people have quite liked the fact, they've liked a lot of what this government has done is a different matter, but I think they quite like the idea of parties having to work together and having to find compromises. Yeah. And so I think, as I was saying earlier on, manifestos will increasingly be not whole programmes for government, but the starting point for negotiations. And I don't think that's a difficult concept to understand. I mean, it happens on the continent, albeit under different voting systems to ours, all the time. And I think people understand that. And, I think we've had the red, then the blue, then the red, then the blue governing for such a long time and still getting things wrong, that I think people like the idea that parties of hopefully like mind will come together and work together in the national interest. And I mean, as I said earlier on, I certainly hope that there is a progressive coalition next time, Labour and the Lib Dems, maybe with SNP support to get them over the line of a majority. And I think that could achieve good, strong, radical, progressive policy ends for the benefit of all the people in the UK.
Yeah.
Right, now, what I'll do very quickly, I'm going to come to I'm going to come to Daryl to see what he was going to say just then. Then we'll go and have a look at some tweets, and then I'll come to Joe. So, what was it you were going to say, Daryl?
I was just agreeing with what Matthew said. Just a lot of his points I was agreeing with.
Oh, all right, fair enough. Right, we'll go to Twitter then and see what people are saying. SD Big Brother, mind-altering curveball from host Regent there. People in the streets, they don't know what to do. It's what I like to do. I like to confuse people like that and throw people off guard. On to more serious things then. Michael Craig 96. SNP aside, nothing much will change. DUP, Sinn Féin, Plaid Cymru, Greens will all have similar seats to 2010. Chris G again at Chris G 0000. Plaid will still only be the fourth party of Wales. Conservatives have every chance of beating that vote share that Blair achieved in 2005. Cameron S. At Cameron_surname. I too feel threatened by the thought of a party that hates my country governing it. Hashtag SNP out. Shawnee Boy at Shiny02. SNP Labour government, issue by issue basis, has the chance to unlock more progressive policies across the whole of the UK. So I think that's what you were saying, Lily. And Marsman at Marsman Talk, Trident, Klaxon, Yawn. So that's interesting.
Clear away.
Just so everybody's aware, the post-show debate is post-show debate. That's an interesting concept. Post-show poll is now up. A debate about the debate. Why don't we do that? Because I can't be bothered. The post-show poll, is now, so you can go on.
If we have a post-show debate, considering that me and Lily Jane have been a bit mean to poor Joe tonight, I have to say that his hair is very impressive. I'm in awe of it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, you look beautiful, as always.
It is rather fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I'll come now. We're now just complimenting Joe. Just skip the show and compliment Joe. I'll come to Joe now. Out of interest, as a Conservative, because for myself, I've also been wrestling with this because it's starting to get on my nerves.
Yeah, right.
Our campaign to do with the SNP is becoming infamously negative.
That's quite
Do you
correct.
think-
Yes.
Do you think that will help us or hinder us north of the border, but also south of the border?
We'll probably double our seats to 2, maybe. That's probably the positive for us. But north of the border, I'd say we have to give a referendum. It's about democracy. We gave them one. There'll probably be another. But the rhetoric this year is definitely different to the referendum debate last year, because the rhetoric is just totally different. In the referendum, it was more the case that it'll become a reality if this and that happens, but being an election, a general election, it's going to be more passé, and generally things being thrown at each other, whether negative or positively. And I think it's just been, things have been too negative to be thrown.
As the Conservative Party is meant to be a party of the whole country, of course, the whole name is the Conservative and Unionist Party. Do you think that, as Lily said, do you feel that maybe it is starting to almost look like playing the English Democrat card, the English Nationalist card?
Yes.
Maybe, especially if you're more southern England, which I'm not. Yeah, maybe so. I feel more attached to both ends, so I don't really have an opinion on it, really. But I'm just unionist, and that's it.
Right. There's been a point raised that I saw the other day about the Tories potentially being happy of doing a potential deal with the DUP. What do panelists think about that, Matthew?
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, I've been encouraging my party to come out and expressly say that they won't be part of any government that includes the DUP. I don't know how many of you followed what Jim Wells, the Northern Irish Executive DUP Health Minister, had to say. Well, I don't know when he said it, but it all came out yesterday in regards to his view that children are at risk, the children of gay couples are at risk. Absolutely outrageous, deeply offensive statement, for which he's only given a kind of half-hearted apology when I believe he's been pressed to do so by his leadership. The DUP are extreme in some of their views, and I think all moderate parties should rule out doing a deal with them. And I think Nick Clegg's ruled out working with UKIP. He should darn well rule out working with the DUP as well. They're a disgrace.
Alvin, this is a sort of playing devil's advocate here. If it comes to the point where a future government has to govern in the national interests, so that it has to put aside party politics and either do confidence and supply or go into coalition. If, for the Conservatives or any other party, if it turns out that only the DUP add up to that magic number that's needed, do you think that the many comments and many positions on homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and gay couples adopting, do you think that should be a red line?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think in this country today we have equality under the law, apart from in Northern Ireland, of course. And I've got friends in the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland, which are the Lib Dem sister party in that part of the UK, and they are still not equal under the law. And why are they not? They're not because of the DUP and the DUP bloc in the executive. I absolutely think that it is a red line. Their views on this issue are abhorrent and should play no part in UK-wide government. And I have to say, if Lib Dems did enter a coalition with the DUP, I'm not sure how much longer I could remain a member of the party.
Could I just sort of present that question as a more theoretical one openly to all panellists as well? If it came to the point where a party, whatever party it was, were nearly at that magic number, but they could only make up the numbers with a party that agreed to work with them, perhaps on an issue-by-issue basis, but had come out with these controversial members had come out with these sorts of controversial statements.
Senior members.
Senior members. Should those be red lines for any parties that want to form government? We'll start with Daryl.
Well, to be honest, it would depend on their other policies. I'm not really sure. I mean, those are very, very extreme views to have now, and certainly not good ones. But I wouldn't be sure on it. Like, I don't think they would have very left-wing or very progressive policies aside from that. So possibly not. I would think probably not. But it would depend. I'm not sure.
Right, Joe?
No. Well, yes, it's a red line. Sorry, but I wouldn't. I personally wouldn't.
How would you, as a Conservative, how would you? Oh, sorry, carry on.
I'm on the Liberal wing of things, so I'm not a social Conservative.
As a Conservative Party member, if you are, I can't actually remember. If the Conservatives did do a deal with the DUP, how would you feel? Would you be able to remain a supporter of the party?
Well, I would still be a supporter because there would be an irrelevance to the coalition.
Right. Lily, would those sorts of things be a red line for you?
No, 100% be a red line. I mean, a coalition with UKIP will be a red line, and the DUP are even more extreme than UKIP, which is quite remarkable. I mean, regarding, I think it was the health minister, was it Matthew, who made that comment? I mean, I generally wasn't surprised. I mean, it's the DUP. It's generally what their party is all about. But I think from the Labour Party perspective, it's unrealistic to happen because we've got a deal with the SDLP. Well, they'll vote with us. Yeah. We would lose their support, and plus we need the support of the SNP. Realistically, the SNP going to work with the DUP and the Labour Party? It's just it wouldn't work. It would be a red line for me. The DUP are way too extreme. I think the only way the DUP are going to work with the party would be the Conservative Party, and it will just be them voting with the Conservatives, quite frankly. So yeah, 100%. The DUP are way too extreme, especially on social issues.
Now, I'm just going to, because we've been talking about the DUP, a few people on Twitter have commented on it. Chris G at Chris G0000. DUP, the peacemakers who signed Good Friday Agreement, bringing unionists with them. He's made a couple of other comments. Shall we go through the outrageous statements of Lib Dem candidates? But also, he said, I want to know what all of your thoughts on this one is before I come to a comment that Cameron S. has made. But firstly, apparently taking a traditional Christian view of sexuality is now enough to bar you from government, according to a self-proclaimed liberal.
Yeah.
Leon, I don't think many. I have absolutely no problem with people holding a Christian faith. That's important in a free society. I don't think many Christians that I know believe that being a child with gay parents puts you at risk. I don't think that is a traditional Christian view. I think that's an extremist view, and is the view held by the health minister of the Northern Ireland Executive.
It was also a man called Jesus who said, "Love thy neighbour and keep one's beliefs under one's own roof."
Right.
So, by the virtue of their own religion, they should be tolerant of other people. And the way it should work is they don't want to live that lifestyle of their own, but they should be tolerant of their neighbours who live that lifestyle, and they should keep their belief under that roof. Now, I don't believe in a lot of Christian things. I think the entire religion of Christianity has many inaccuracies and hypocrisies within it, and a lot of things that don't match up. But that is one big prophecy of Christianity and Jesus and all its other symbols, is that aura of understanding, and just that.
I would also make the point, Leon, that there's not many Lib Dem councillors denying rights to gay people. So you can't really compare the DUP to Liberal Democrat councillors.
We can make all sorts of look at every politician's comments, can't we, really?
You can, Joe, but by the same token, this is the health minister. This is someone who wields significant influence in the province and has significant power, and these are his totally intolerant views. So it's a bit different to just a member of a party who has no power at all. I personally think if the DUP keep this man in office, then it says everything you need to know about their party.
It's flagrant defence, I agree.
Thinking about parties and any influence they have, Cameron S. has said on the subject of the DUP at Cameron_surname, surely these off-colour views in the DUP would not play a part in the UK government. 8 or 9 votes versus most of ConLab, etc. Any thoughts? I think he's basically making the point that if the numbers add up, and considering the views probably wouldn't play much into it, is it then really so bad if the Tories do a deal, or any of the parties do a deal?
But Leon, what would the DUP want to support that government? I mean, this is the question, isn't it? I mean, in this coalition, the Lib Dems have only had 56, 57 MPs, but we've got quite a lot out of this government, 75% of our manifesto. So the question is, what would the DUP demand if the Conservatives were reliant on them for votes? They would have their own red lines, and none of us know quite exactly what they would be. Would they just be economic red lines for Northern Ireland, or would they be socially conservative red lines? We don't know this at the moment.
Does anyone have any comments on what Cameron said?
What did Cameron say again? Sorry, Leon.
He was basically making the point that with so few votes, if they were needed to make up the numbers to get to that, as I keep calling it, magic number. Hang on a minute, Matthew. To make up that sort of magic number, with so few votes, and with the Conservatives and Labour pretty much opposing these sort of extreme views.
Yeah.
Well, quote unquote extreme. I have to be impartial. Would it really be so bad?
I don't think you have to be impartial about homophobia.
Would it really be so bad if any party did do a deal with them?
I would make the same point as Matthew in that, it depends, what would the DUP want, in order to gain their support, because the DUP aren't going to give their support willy-nilly. They're going to want something in response. So it's no lie to say that the DUP are extreme, and if they want certain things, then should we accept those demands? I wouldn't say so.
Right. What we'll do now, I'm going to have, as I said, because this is a topic submitted really by me, but I don't want to give any closing statements on it, I'm going to ask for a closing statement on the topic of the influence of the nations in the next Parliament from everyone, and I'm going to start with Darrell.
Well, I said earlier my opinions if the SNP assume a lot of power over Britain. I think they'll take the country in a more progressive direction. They'll make it more centre-left. They'll do more to combat austerity. And that is, of course, just what they're saying. And there is people who are saying, well, will they really live up to that? I believe that there is a very likely chance that they will, because they have made a lot of promises and they have stuck to a lot of them before. So I think there is a chance that if they are voted into power, we will see results from them that we voted for. So I think they're going to take us more progressively, and I think they're going to live up to their promises.
Right. Joe?
I believe it is about the case of promises again. The theme of promises from 2010 now moves on to 2015. But the one question I would like to throw out there is, would there be a possibility of a Labour Conservative government coalition?
A grand coalition?
They have it in Germany.
Well, let's face it, they are both Conservative parties these days, so,
Right, so, right, Lily?
First of all, I'm really disappointed in you, Joe, for not mentioning chaos and competence. You're really missing the opportunity here. Quickly on the grand coalition, that would never happen because the Labour Party membership would never accept it. The last time that happened, we chucked our party leader out, which was Ramsay MacDonald. On the point about nation states having influence in the next government, as I say, I think it's absolutely fantastic. We need to reform our electoral system. We do need to give more influence to Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and actually have an identity for England, which is very, very important. And it's about devolving power. As I say, I'll be very, very interested in an SNP Labour government. I'm not as enthusiastic with the SNP, but I'm interested to see how it would go. Scrap and Trident would be fantastic. But yeah, overall, I think we do need to devolve power, Leon. Give more powers to the constituencies. Yeah, I'm mumbling here, but it would be. I would find it very, very interesting to have an SNP Labour government. I would want to see how well they would do.
Can it be any worse than it is now?
Yeah, exactly. It can't be any worse than this current government.
Oh, you cheeky so-and-sos. And now, finally, last but not least, on to Matthew.
Thank you. Well, I'd just remind Lee, Jane and Darrell that this government have done a great number of good things, including
VAT,
equal marriage, including the pupil premium, including relinking pensions to earnings, which Labour didn't do in 13 years. So, this government has done some good things, although it's done a number of things I disagree with as well. I personally would like to see a progressive coalition next time. I'd like to see a Labour Lib Dem coalition and maybe with the support of some SNP MPs in terms of votes to get us over the line of a majority. That, of course, will depend on my party returning a significant number of MPs. I think it will probably be between about 30 and 35 MPs, so a significant parliamentary bloc in Parliament still, but I think such a progressive government would deliver good things for the people of this country.
Right, thank you very much. So that's the end of this very special edition of Spectrum Debates. So can I thank everybody who's come on tonight? Darrell, Joe, Lily and Matthew. Can I also thank everyone at home for watching and tweeting us with comments. Head over to spectrumdebates.com to vote for your favourite debater, and if you want to be down there on the bottom of the screen and you want to be debating other panelists next week and beyond. Tweet us at Spectrum Debates, and we'll get you on the show. So it's good night from me and good night from everyone else. Bye-bye.
Bye.